Hi, Interpersonal Communication class. This is Professor Barry Brennan. I'm going to talk to you about expectancy violations theory. We're going to go over that briefly, and I'm going to go straight to the PowerPoint right now. Let me just go find it. Here we go. There we are. Let's see. Start from the slide. So this is basically what we think of as a nonverbal communication theory. And it's because it usually focuses on how people behave. It could be words, but oftentimes it's how people behave. So I'm not going to take the time for you to look at this clip, but Judy Burgoon, she is actually the author of this particular theory. And there's an interview with her where she really explains the details of it, but we're going to go over some of the details with it. So what you want to think about is what type of situations, and I want you to think about this as we talk through what this theory is and how we would apply it to a situation, or how we would look at a situation and see if an expectancy has been violated. But what types of situations would you consider to be a positive violation of your expectations? Right? What situations means we all have expectations about how we expect people to behave. Whether it's social mores, whether it's in a community setting, whether it's in social roles, right? So what situations would you consider a positive violation? So violation means it's going against what you think is normal, okay? What you think is normal. I put that in quotes. What you expect. It's going against. So violating means, a positive violation means it's positively doing something, not doing someone acting in a way that you don't expect, but it affects you positively. Okay? That's what a positive violation means. Okay. So expectations, let's define that. Enduring cognitions about the anticipated verbal and nonverbal communication of others. Let's just put that in really easier terms. So enduring cognitions means how we think about people, what we think about the behavior of people. Like the expectation, that's what I mean enduring cognition is. We have an expectation of how our mom acts, or our dad acts, or our teacher acts, or how a student acts, or a nurse, or a doctor, or the post person, right? We have certain expectancies, which is called enduring cognitions, about how we expect them to verbally and non-verbally communicate with others. Here's an easy one. How about I say, thank you so much for whatever they did. And usually people say, you're welcome, or no problem, or they usually acknowledge. When someone doesn't acknowledge you, that may make you feel like, well, why didn't they acknowledge what I said? Okay, that's an example of a violation. Now, this isn't going to fall into this particular thing, because a violation, according to this theory, has to have other components to it. Let's look at what those are. Okay, so it has the social component, and it includes that you must know socially what you expect from someone, and it has to also be person specific. So it's not enough. Let's go back to that. I say thank you and I expect some acknowledgement for you. If you don't know me, that's not really a violation. Now, if we have an ongoing, let's say it's the post person. Now it's in the afternoon in my house. It's about the time, it's Labor Day, so the post person's not going to be here. But let's say it's any other day. It's the afternoon. It's time for the postal worker to deliver the mail. So let's say I know the postal worker. Let's say his name is Jim. Usually it's a man. So let's say his name is Jim. And Jim and I say hello. I say hello. I say, thank you so much for the mail. He always says, you're welcome, or goodbye, have a nice day, or whatever it is, right? But some acknowledgement. And I know a little bit about Jim. Let's say I know that Jim is married. Jim has a kid, 2 cats. Let's just say that Jim and I have talked. So that means I have person-specific knowledge related to that person's behavior. So if Jim does something, right, I expect Jim to deliver the mail, right, in a way that's appropriate. And Jim and I usually communicate, so I'll expect Jim to communicate back to me when I say thank you so much, for him to say something like, you're welcome, have a great day, or whatever he normally says, right? That's what I mean. That's a setup. It has to be social and idiosyncratic. So you have to know the person. It can't just be a social situation. You have to really know the person. Now, that's how we develop expectations about people, with both in their role and that we know them personally. We know something specifically about them. This could go with teacher-student. You and I are getting to know each other. More of you know me than vice versa, because there's a lot of you, but you're all seeing me all the time doing these things. So if I do something that doesn't match, you'll be like, what does that mean, right? So you've developed expectations about how I will behave based upon who I am as a person and based upon my role. Okay, we all got this? Let's move on to the next piece. So it is predicated on means what is it founded on? Okay, I'm giving you some new words to add to your vocabulary. So EVT, expectancy violations theory, is predicated on, is founded upon this idea that we make predictions for any given individual message or transaction. The predictions that we make rely on a combination of generic expectancies and any knowledge about the person's behavior. Okay? That we have these general expectations. We're just talking about that, right? The social part and the idiosyncratic, the personal part. The social part, the social role part, and the personal knowledge we have about that person. That if their behavior deviates from what you know about that person, that's what we mean about the violation. Okay? If we rely on them acting a certain way, but when they don't do that, then we go, what's that about? So it's founded upon that we make predictions about how people are going to behave. We do it all the time. We expect it. So if I know Jim the postman, and I say hello to Jim, thank you so much for the mail, have a great day, be safe, and he says, which he normally says, you're welcome, you have a great day, and you be safe too. Right? Now, if Jim were to turn around and say, you know what, why don't you go F off or throw the mail at me? I'd be like, whoa, what's that all about? Because not only Jim, he'd be violating the social mores of how you behave, right? He's a service worker to me. And two, my relationship with Jim is like, where did that come from, right? If Jim and I haven't had any problems, what's that behavior coming from? That would be violating. That's how expectancy violations theory works. Let's go deeper. Okay. So the expectations derive from what we call three classes of variables. The actor, that's the person. What kind of relationship you have to have a relationship. And what's a context? So the context often defines the role. Okay, the context often defines the role. So the context of the classroom is you're with other students and you have a teacher in the classroom, right? That's a context. Also, there's roles usually in that context. So these overlap, but they intersect with each other. Understand? So the actor is a person, relationship is what kind of relationship you have with that other person. And then the context. What situation is that happening in? So the actor is characteristics related to the individual, such as gender, age, country of origin, right? All those things influence how we see that person. Here's an example. Things that we have, expectations we have about women. Women are expected to stand closer to each other than men do. That is an expectation that we often have in Western culture. It's true. Notice it. Notice if you look at when we're out of the pandemic, when you look at how men and women and how women stand together versus how men stand together in the space they leave in between them. Okay. People from contact cultures are expected to stand closer together than non-contact. So this means like often cultures that have more affection between them, that are more demonstrative, I would not say American culture is necessarily demonstrative, but I would say maybe Mexican culture is, or Latin cultures in general, or um, Spanish or Italian. Like there are certain cultures that are more demonstrative than other cultures. So how space is used between two people, that's just an example of expectations that we get around people's behavior. Okay. Then the relationship piece. That's the characteristics jointly defined by two or more individuals. So you develop a relationship with, let's say, me and the post person, right? The postman. Uh, Familiar relationships, relationships where you have attraction to someone. When two people of equal status, so that could be you and another student, they expect to stand closer to one another, use more mutual gaze. So if you two friends stand together, if they have a relationship, just friendship, you expect them to stand closer together and be able to look each other eyeball to eyeball, and it not to mean more than that because they're more intimately involved in terms of knowing each other. Okay, but when there's a status difference, and I can give you a great example of students when I'm in the classroom and I feel like I know the student, sometimes the student will come step close to me, right? Which often when they stand close to me, it means it really defines their comfort with me and their feeling of intimacy with me, right? Oftentimes though, a student will stand like the social distance away. They'll stand 3 or 4 feet away from me when they're talking to me. And if I can't hear them, oftentimes I will step closer to them. Now remember, I'm the teacher, they're the student. So there's a power differential going on, right? So if I step closer, oftentimes they step farther away. So there are these things that we know, right? Someone in a power position, we respect their space. There's that going on. And there's also the space also defines the level of intimacy. Oftentimes, the level of intimacy you can have with a person. It's not always true, but that's what happens. Okay, context. So context means that's a situation. Features of the setting, type of interaction, the communication takes place. Okay, where is it happening? Is it happening in a subway? Is it happening in, like, let's go think of the subway right now. You're on the subway. Have you ever ridden a train? Like a subway train, not a train, but a subway. Sometimes it's really crowded, right? And you're expecting to get your space invaded because you're on a subway. Now, if someone, think about this, if you've ridden the bus, it'd be a good example. There's a pretty empty bus. There's all kinds of empty double seats. And the person decides to sit down next to you, right? Don't you think, what's going on with that? Why don't they just sit in their own seat? Why do they have to sit next to me when there's all this available seats around? Again, setting defines how we think about something. Seated interactions have different expectations than standing ones. Formal interactions versus informal interactions. This has to do with the setting, how it defines what you expect to happen. Remember, we're talking about expectations and violating expectations. Okay? Looking at how this is defined. Occurs when another person's behavior falls outside the normative range and is sufficiently deviant to be noticed. So, how do we know it's deviant? What does that even mean? Right? Deviant means it has to actually make us feel something. We have to have what's called a physiological reaction. Right? That's when when the expectancy has been violated. We must have a physiological response to it. Sometimes violations are made, they're consciously made, and sometimes they're not. We're going to stop here and I'm going to pick this up in the next little piece.